more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Minuk in the top right, with the Ezra Ginsburg proudly modeling that Seagram's 88 shirt in the bottom middle. I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours.
83, Drew.
Pardon me, David?
83. He said 88.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right.
I mean, the brand is Seagram's 83.
Yes, it is. It is.
Hey, we're going to have to ask Seagram's for a Seagram's 82 because I'm a 1982 birth year. So
we'll do that right after we take Drew to the optometrist to have his eyes checked.
Honestly, it's you would think these things are thick enough as they are, but apparently not. You know, I think what the problem was, okay, I see now that it's a 3. It was my fault. I admittedly, apparently reading and comprehending and stringing those two things together is difficult for me on occasion. Nonetheless, we welcome everybody to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on this Saturday morning. 2 hours of Jets talk. We're all about the Winnipeg team that continues to be absolutely on fire with one of the most impressive performances of the season last night, continuing their winning streak, making it 5 wins in a row now by going into Sunrise, Florida, and really just doing a great job, the prototypical perfect road game against former Jets head coach Paul Maurice and the defending Eastern Conference champions last night, guys. You know, it was an impressive victory by the Winnipeg Jets. I could feel the excitement, it was palpable. The performance of that team certainly getting a boost by getting Rick Bowness behind the bench yesterday, and that was so fantastic to see. But you could really, it was just a very good day, I would say, from start to finish for the Winnipeg Jets and for the entirety of the Jets organization, and seeing the connectivity that exists between players and coaches and management, and everything about yesterday was probably a bit of a feather in the cap for the Winnipeg Jets.
Absolutely. You know, we weren't really sure what news we were going to get, right? About Rick Bowness. Like, there was some speculation that maybe, Bones was going to step away from the team for an extended period of time, even the rest of the season, right? So obviously this was much better news. As you mentioned, Drew, Judy Bowness doing better, Rick Bowness now back with the team full time. And, we have to give Scott Arniel a lot of credit. I mean, Arniel is a name that is very well known in this province, and obviously, across the NHL, but more so in Manitoba, having played for the Jets and being a Moose coach. And he did an admirable job. And I mean, there's no reason, to not expect that. I mean, Arniel is a very smart hockey mind. He's been a longtime assistant.
Did Ezzy just cut out, Dave? Can you hear?
I hope I didn't cut out. I hope not.
Okay, there you go. You're back
like
now.
Yesterday, right?
You're
so
good.
I was just finishing, giving Arniel his due props, right? But yeah, obviously, huge news for the Jets, and we know that they've been kind of carrying, Rick Bowness and Judy's health as motivation, in addition to, the death of Adam Johnson, with all of the players on the Jets from Minnesota, right? So there's no shortage of, things that the Jets have used as motivation for the team, right? But it was a very tight game. We broke it down on the post-game show when we weren't having technical difficulties and dropping F-bombs. Dave just had the comment up there. For the people listening on the podcast, we had a little bit of technical issues, and then we went
gremlins.
Yeah, we had some gremlins, then we went dark for a little bit. We did cut it out of the podcast, the Friday night post-game show podcast, because there was about 5 minutes of dead air. But
Ezzy, we also cut it out of the video. So that's the benefit of watching it live. You get us all. You get us in our glory, and sometimes not so much in our glory. But now if you're watching it this morning, you're going, what are Dave and Ezzy talking about? There was no snafu. That show was fantastic because we edited the video and we edited the audio. So it looks like it was a clean show yesterday, just like a clean 3-0 Jets win. Very tidy by the Jets and very tidy by Ezzy and I, unless you actually watched it live.
Well, the only thing that doesn't make it clean is it jumps from Dave not hearing Dave's audio to then just Dave by himself, coming back and saying that he wish he didn't drop an F-bomb, because what happened was I kind of, did the show alone for 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll admit it, I got a little flustered. I apologize, IC Nation. I give Drew a lot of credit. Hosting's not easy because you're the quarterback. You're running the ship, and I'm much better as a first mate.
Although, hold on, Ezzy, we do have something pointed out by Matthew Thompson. I saw 2 Ezzies last night. There was at one point, Ezzy did have a little gremlin pop up very briefly where he was frozen. He was talking, then he was frozen, then he was gone, then he came back in the chat, but the frozen Ezzy was still in the chat. So if you noticed the screenshot yesterday, that one I left. That was
yeah, I swear, I leave for one day, I leave for one post-game show, and all hell breaks loose. Apparently,
there was chaos.
How was the concert last night, Drew?
It was very good, thank you. I quite enjoyed the concert. It was I liked it a lot. He played all the songs that I was hoping to hear. So
play Chilly Willy, Chilly Willy.
Exactly. That's me. That's me sitting in the front row, Barney gumbling it, demanding Chilly Willy. Nonetheless, it was a very good concert. Thank you for asking, Ezzy. You mentioned Scott Arniel, and I think I don't want to gloss over that too quickly, because Arniel now in 2 different stints as an interim head coach, which is sort of hard to believe because that doesn't usually happen in the span of 2 years. But Arniel, I think, has significantly, I would say, rehabilitated what people were thinking about him when he was hired here in Winnipeg. Because when he was hired here, there was a lot of skepticism about, why was he such an in-demand coach when things did not go well for him in Columbus in his previous head coaching experience. He's been an assistant coach, throughout the league since then. But there was the sort of a little bit of the pushback, I would say, that just because he used to play for the Jets doesn't mean he necessarily has to be hired by this version of the Jets. I don't think that's a talking point anymore, given what he's done in a couple of really, I'm going to say, uncomfortable situations. Last year, when early on in the season, when Rick had COVID and had to step away to get rid of that and to get back to health. And then, of course, now in the most recent one where they stepped away to take care of Judy Bonus and her health. And the humanity that was on display in the pre-game press conference and then in the video that the Jets tweeted out last night or put out on their socials last night about Adam Lowry giving him the puck, I think, post-game was really special. Those were nice moments. And I'm usually a cynic, as most people who watch the show know, that I tend to fall on the dark side of things. But even the darkest heart in Mindell.
You are a dark man, Drew, that's for sure.
Thank you. Even the
Gothic, I would say.
Yeah, that's me exactly. I'm going to start painting my fingernails black and wear trench coats, but maybe that's a little too dark. But nonetheless, I thought there was great humanity on display yesterday, and I think Scott Arniel has done such a good job the last couple of years in these awkward situations that I don't think people are, maybe if he's the next head coach, and I'm not saying he's going to be, but if he is, I think a lot of maybe the concerns at least have been alleviated for now along those lines.
I would agree with that. I think Dave would as well. And that's just the thing. And I think what you're referring to is when Scott Arniel was hired as the associate coach, there were a lot of people, and that was obviously a very tentative time for Jets fans, right? Sure. Because obviously Jets fans were hoping Barry Trotz was going to be hired, but we know that Nashville hired him as their GM, right? So I think a lot of people thought it was, just True North going back to the True North well, right? Because of Scott Arniel's history with the Manitoba Moose, and then obviously having played here for the Jets 1.0, right? But the reality is the drop-off is basically non-existent, Dave, when from Rick Bowness to Scott Arniel, right? And that's impressive. When you have the head coach go down, and be with his wife, and then you have Scott Arniel step up and the Jets don't miss a beat. So you can still have some skepticism when it comes to, could Scott Arniel be the head coach full time? But I would have absolutely no problem with that. The reality is, he's a tactician, he's a smart guy, and the players respect him and like him.
Well, and to the point that Drew's made, if you did have that concern, which would be reasonable, there's a lot of reasons for concern. You don't know how a guy is going to jump into a role. This test of that, theory has looked very good for Scott Arniel. And let's be realistic. Rick Bowness has stayed involved. He's, he said on the media, in his media availability, that he was sending in clips that he was speaking with Scott Arniel every single day, which isn't a huge surprise. And of course, they've only been in Florida, I think, for like under 2 weeks. So he was still in Winnipeg, obviously, for part of it, and was in contact with the coach. He said he met with the players, I think, about 2 weeks ago. So probably just before he came to Florida. So yeah, I mean, like I'm with Ezzy. I think that I think he's acquitted himself well. I think there may have been a question mark, Drew, because you're right. Who is Scott Arniel as a coach? But for now, you see a guy who seems to be ready for that role. And obviously Rick Bowness isn't going anywhere. Rick Bowness is going to be the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. But, the succession plan looked like this. And if this is the sneak preview, well, it's served the Jets well. It's given them an opportunity to say, we're not there yet, but whenever Rick Bowness decides to step away, if Scott Arniel ends up being the next coach in waiting, he's more than capable of handling that job. And so it's not really something you ever really get as an organization.
Right.
So
you don't get a test run with a
you don't. Coach. You really don't. You don't get it. You don't get these types of opportunities. So I mean, over and above the fact that the Jets have been unbelievable in the last 15 games, like Rick Bowness missed 13, and the Jets have been 11-2-2 in their last 15. So the Jets they were turning the tide. We saw it from the start of that first game against Calgary, a game they could have won. Their 5-on-5 play this year has been better. Yeah. But I just think like it's just a reality that this Jets club seems to be bought in with either coach and are playing the system that they need to win. And now with Connor Hellebuyck, Ezzy, going back to being Connor Hellebuyck that everybody knows and expected him to be, I mean, it makes the team a lot more formidable.
Right. And I think, boys, the big difference for me in my outlook for this Jets team, I would say has changed over the last week, because now the Jets are proving that they can beat upper echelon teams, right? Maybe not upper echelon, but, I was a little bit skeptical, when the Jets were, banking all these points, but they're beating teams like Arizona and St. Louis and Nashville, even though Nashville beat St. Louis 7-3 yesterday. And obviously the Jets face the Predators tomorrow. So the Predators are actually, sticking around a little bit. I still don't think
4 in a row.
Yeah, they've won 4 in a row. I still don't think the Predators will be a playoff team, but the reality is they've still got enough talent that they're competitive, right? But now you've beat the New Jersey Devils, you've beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, you've beat the Florida Panthers, right? Like, so the Jets have beat good teams now. Yeah. And I mean, even the Arizona Coyotes, I would say, are a good team. Like, they could make the playoffs this year. I don't know.
And as I said, Jesse, last night, Drew, they were 2 points back.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, like, that's the biggest difference is the Jets are now beating teams that are in playoff spots, and they've been incredible. Like 6-0-2 against the Eastern Conference is incredible. And what are they, 5-1 against the Central, 6-1 against the Central? So, I mean, again, it's only 19 games into the season, but I think at this point in the season, you have to just say the Jets are a good team. Like, they're playing really well, and now that Connor Hellebuyck is playing at his level, normal level. And then you have all these lines going, and then you're going to get Gabe Vilardi back. Like, the Jets are on a very good trajectory right now,
and they're doing it in a sustainable manner. I mean, I think any team can get hot on the back of exceptional goaltending for a week or 2 weeks. But what the Jets are doing is repeatable, and they are doing it on more or less on a night in, night out basis. So there is a consistency to their game, and that is what is so important. And that consistency is only going to get better with the impending arrival or impending return of Gabe Vilardi. So, I mean, which is could very well be tomorrow, because Rick Bowness wasn't prepared to rule him out of tomorrow's game in Nashville when he was under the microscope from Kenny and some of the other folks who were interviewing him yesterday. So, it could be tomorrow. If it's not tomorrow, then you would presume it would be when the team returns home on Tuesday to face Dallas again. But it's coming, and it's coming quickly. And then all of a sudden, not completely at full strength, but the Winnipeg Jets.
Spency doesn't want you to forget about Ville either, Drew.
Well, he's
that's a 2024 reality, though.
Yeah,
he's gonna be on the moose.
Exactly. I mean, he's a month away.
2024 is not too far away. I mean,
that's true.
But I mean, I'm talking about in the next either tomorrow or Tuesday, as opposed to 4 or 5 weeks from now, where your forward group is going to get another boost, and all of a sudden, you have, remember, it wasn't that long ago. It was at the start of the year. David Gustafsson was your 13th forward, right?
Yep. Right.
Now, I would say David Gustafsson, in his performance as of late, he looks like he's playing I'd say he's playing his best hockey at the NHL level in his career.
Mhm.
And he's playing as a confident player who at times is almost noticeable out there for being a bit of a force. Now, he's a force on the fourth line, and I'm not talking about elevating David Gustafsson to a different role, but you add in Gabe Vilardi, and for argument's sake, and I'm sure we'll talk about it over the course of the next 90 plus minutes, you add in Gabe Vilardi back onto your first line, and you can move Alex Iafallo, and I mean, you could even move Iafallo all the way down to that fourth line if you wanted to. And, if your fourth line is Iafallo and Gustafsson and Morgan Barron, well, you're pretty comfortable rolling all four of those Winnipeg Jets lines out there.
And it could be Vladislav Nemesnikov too, right?
It could be anybody. I mean,
that's
I'm not
the thing,
saying it
and
has
that's
to
why
be.
I mentioned on last night's postgame show to Dave, and we had a good chat going. Thanks for everybody for tuning in yesterday, despite those technical blips that we were having.
What blips, Ezzy? You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I guess we've erased that from the archives, Dave. But I mean, the reality is, like, whether Gabe Vilardi goes back to his right wing spot on the top line with Scheifele and Connor, or if he centers Perfetti and Ehlers, or if Perfetti centers him and Ehlers, or if Vilardi goes on the third line, obviously we don't expect that, but I think Lowry, Appleton, Niederreiter, I mean, you're not messing that up. That line has been so good, right? So to Drew's point, whether it's bumping Alex Iafallo down to the second line or fourth line, or it's Nemesnikov going down to the fourth line, Axel Jonsson Fjällby, I think we all agree, once Vilardi comes back, will be the 13th forward. And to the point of David Gustafsson playing the best hockey of his career, and he's playing up the middle. Like, I know Dave, has said many times before at the Moose level, he's been able to play center and wing, more so wing at the NHL level, but I really like him up the middle. So I really don't think there's a big drop off from Kupari to Gustafsson, mainly because Kupari's a guy that kills penalties, but so does Gustafsson. And you're not going to get a lot of offense from Kupari. And I think, we expect him to score eventually when he comes back. But Gustafsson's got a couple goals this year, and I agree with Drew. He's playing really well.
Look, this Winnipeg Jets team right now, I mean, we know that they're a possession positive team. It's interesting to note the only players, who I'm going to call regular players, so, the guys who've been in the lineup night in, night out, that are less than 50% possession are Connor, Scheifele, and Iafallo. Everyone else is over 50%. But you remember when Vilardi was playing, I mean, Vilardi, in the 2+ games that he played.
Small sample size.
Sample size, but you remember how consistent and how dominant Vilardi, Scheifele, and Connor were together. So if you put that trio back together, and again, those guys are getting the tough matchups. They're playing against the other team's best lines, and maybe with Connor, Scheifele, and Iafallo, they've been struggling possession-wise against some of those other teams' best lines. They haven't been struggling putting the puck in the net or struggling on the scoreboard, but let's just talk possession right now. In that context, all of a sudden, maybe that problem gets alleviated, and you are running 4 strong possession lines that are, controlling the play against your opponents. Something
to your point, Drew, the line that you're talking, I mean, they weren't up against, but a lot last night. It was the Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, Carter Verhaeghe line.
Right.
And it wasn't a huge advantage in expected goals or anything like that, but that line outplayed the Scheifele line. And I think you're right. I mean, that line has cooled off. And I mean, they were red hot, and that line has cooled off a little bit. But Ehlers, Perfetti, Nemesnikov has picked up the slack. Right. And that line has been really solid. And then obviously Lowry, Appleton, and El Nino has been really good, right? So it seems like whenever one of the top 2 lines is struggling, the other one picks it up, and then the third line has just been the definition of consistency, right? So I think, Vilardi is going to help the Jets, whatever line he goes back on.
I mean, to me, it's like, how big a splash do you want to make in the pool? As he loves to cannonball, we know that, but NHL coaches
and belly flop. Don't forget the
belly flop for sure. But for the record, I did a back flop this summer. Hurt like hell. I'm not ever going to do that ever again.
Like a flat back bump.
Yeah, I was like, whatever. And then let me tell you, I was in pain. It wasn't great. But
why? Hang on.
I
just gloss over that. Why wouldn't you think it would hurt?
Well, I knew it was going to hurt. I tried to arch my back a little bit, but I'm saying I was trying to do something else, and it ended up as a back. It wasn't intentional, Drew.
Were there intoxicants involved? I need to know more.
No. Maybe I may have been.
Dave's like one of the Mandelbaum children. You think you're better than me?
Anywho, so the point is that NHL coaches generally don't like to make a big splash, unlike our previous conversation. So the question becomes: do you just make maybe you start Vilardi on that fourth if you don't want to work him in hard, or if you think he's ready to go, you put him. I mean, to me, the Iafallo experiment on the first worked great, but I think you put Vilardi back where Iafallo was. You move Iafallo down to the fourth, and then you have a really good fourth line. And to be honest, you don't run him like a fourth line. You give him more minutes, give him opportunity. And I think with Iafallo, they probably produce a little bit more, because I think that my concern is with the way the second line is running right now, if you break up all three, and none of these need to stick together, but it seems to be working right now, right? So do you really want to upset the apple cart too much? Probably not. So, by if you move Vilardi to the first, Iafallo to the second, Nemestikov to the fourth, the only line you're keeping intact, obviously, is the third, right. And you are making a lot of changes. To me, and a pretty easy one is Iafallo down to the fourth in spot of Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, Gabe Vilardi up to that top line. The top line probably gets hot again with Vilardi up there. The second line remains what they're doing, which is, fantastic work. The third line, fantastic. And then you've got a fourth line that I think, again, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby's been sufficient, but I think Iafallo makes that line even better, obviously. And I think then you've got a driver who could potentially get that line scoring. And now you're really dangerous because you've got 4 scoring lines. So to me, that's the move that makes the most sense.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. It's to me that's the both the simplest and most rational move. Anything more than that is probably moving too many pieces, and maybe moving pieces just for the sake of moving pieces.
And the reality is Rick Bowness and Scott Arniel for sure have already decided they have a preference where they're going to put Vilardi. I don't think anything's going to change in the next game. I mean, I guess Vilardi could play against Nashville, but I think I'm going to probably guess that he comes back against Dallas. That's just my guess.
I think he plays tomorrow. That's my personal opinion. Is I think he plays tomorrow.
I think it's a coin flip right now, by the way, Drew.
Well, I mean,
I don't think that there's anything leaning towards like yes or no. I think it's very much up in the air.
Yeah,
if anything, leaning towards him coming back, but we'll see.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if he plays tomorrow. You get another sort of boost, another boost of adrenaline to your lineup. You can't the presence of Rick Bowness behind the bench gave a boost yesterday. You finished the road trip strong with another boost of getting back your top line right winger. The guy who's been marked for that position. And all of it, like you said, look. Alex Iafallo is a double-digit goal scorer in the NHL. He's already got 4 this year. There's no question he's going to get somewhere between 15 and 20, probably in that realm. Look, the Jets' fourth line as a whole in the last number of years, total together, couldn't get that many goals. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you're adding Morgan Barron.
Well, the fourth line doesn't have a ton of goals this year, but they have been playing well. There's a difference. You can play well and not necessarily get a ton of goals. Or you can play not very well and not get a lot of goals, which I agree. That was kind of the Saku Manalainen, Kevin Stenlund, right. Carson Kuhlman, those types of players.
Although, I think Kevin Stenlund has like 5 or 6 goals this year.
Well, he's a good player. I mean, he was an excellent penalty killer. He's a perfectly capable fourth line forward. You're just not going to get a lot of.
Yeah, look, Ezzy, again, he cut out on me there for a second. I'm not sure if he did to you too, Dave, or not, but whatever it might be.
Half a second.
Yeah, half a second, little glitch there.
Apologize.
It's okay. We'll forgive you this time, and this time only, except for the next time when we'll forgive you then as well.
Yeah.
These are all, look, this Winnipeg Jets team is feeling good about themselves for good reason. They are right there with the Colorado Avalanche. They are right there, in fact, ahead of the Dallas Stars based on regulation victories versus so far this year. So, I mean, if you had said, and it certainly looks like it's a 3-horse race in that Central Division. Now, granted, we're just game 20, so the quarter mark of the season is tomorrow against Nashville. So there's lots of season still to be played. But if you had to tier the teams. Throughout the NHL right now, the Winnipeg Jets, even without Gabe Vilardi for all but 3 of those games this year, are certainly towards the, would you say they're in the top 10 of the teams in the league? I mean, right now they're 7th. I mean, so you would say that they're top 10 among the teams in the league right now.
Well, and so it's obviously subjective, as you know, Drew, but if you're a top 10 team, like how far away are you from a top 5 team? And I guess then the question becomes like, how many really, like, if you're going to have like a top tier, second tier, whatever, like let's say the Jets are in the second tier behind, Boston, Vegas, Dallas, maybe you throw Carolina in there. I mean, Vancouver's up there now. Washington's gone on a winning streak. Like, I guess my point is, I don't think that, the parity is any different than previous years. And also, we say this every single year. And, going back to what was that, 2019 or 2018, when Tampa Bay had the amazing regular season record and then got swept by Columbus in the first round. It happened again last year with Boston, setting a record with, what did they have, 125 points? And then they lost in the first round to Florida. So the thing is, like, I guess not, even if the Jets aren't in that upper tier with, like, I think we would all agree, Boston, Vegas, Dallas. I've been really impressed by Dallas. I mean, if we're talking about how good the Jets are, Dallas has already beat the Jets twice this year. And I don't think that the Jets are, that far away from Dallas. I think they're probably, a good top 4 defenseman. But that, to me, is the biggest difference between the Jets and Dallas. Dallas has the forward depth to compete with the Jets. Yeah. And their group of top 6 defensemen is better than the Jets' top 6 defensemen. So I think the Stars have to, for me at least, are a top 3 team in the NHL right now. But the drop off is not that far. And like you said, I mean, you've been without Vilardi, you're without Kupari now, you've been out with Heinola. So I mean, other teams have injuries as well, and other teams are dealing with things like Colorado, for example. Samuel Girard is entering the NHL substance abuse program, or player assistance program, I should say, right? Like, so all teams are dealing with, various things, right? But yeah, Drew, I think absolutely. I don't know how you can't say the Jets are a top 10 team right now. I think some people are asking the question, are they a top 5 team? But I mean, the record speaks for itself. 11-2-2 in their last 15 games. It's incredible.
And if you look at the starts, this is one of their best starts that they've had in the first 19 games. I mean, again, we were making fun of how people cherry pick stats to suit the narrative, but just looking at the 19 games, just quickly, because I think Scotty Billick of the Winnipeg Sun wrote, "Is this the best version of the Winnipeg Jets that we've seen since they've returned to Winnipeg?" And they're still up 1 point back of that 17-18 team, but it's pretty close. They're 12-5-2 right now. That team was 12-4-3. And this is the same start as they had in 18-19 the year after that. So it's matched one of their best ever. And the fact of the matter is that it's, as I think, I don't remember which one of you guys said it, but it's the truth. The reality is this team is playing sustainable hockey. They're not playing, this is not like
cheating the game.
They're not cheating the game. They're playing pretty good 5-on-5. And again, they've got Connor Hellebuyck back to Connor Hellebuyck-like levels. And we don't know. I saw one of the questions earlier was whether Laurent Brossoit would start tomorrow or not. I mean, of course, there's, a lot of space between these games. They've had a lot of days off, so they've had a lot of rest.
Rick intimated strongly that it will be Brossoit tomorrow.
He gave a pretty characteristic "we'll see." So I don't know if I'd go so far. He also said the same thing about Vilardi. He said "we'll see." So with Rick Bowness, a "we'll see" is definitely. I'm not giving you any sort of insight, but to me, of course, if you're going to give,
didn't he say "we'll see"? But then he said something like he's a strong option.
So,
I think
seems about right.
Well,
anyways,
honestly, guys, if Laurent Brossoit was brought in to provide to start more games than David Riddick, right, and take some of that load off of Connor Hellebuyck.
Yeah.
So this is the type of game I think that is the exact type of game that you put Laurent Brossoit in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what. Let's talk about more about that as we come back from commercial break. Garrett Hohl is set to join us for more Jets talk. It's a Saturday morning. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show is going strong. Don't go anywhere. Drew Mandel, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg with you.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Whoa, Ezzy, everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey, Drew. Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to test if the game is better at home or at Boston Pizza. The results are irrefutable. Catch the game at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Are you dreaming of your very own backyard rink this winter, but dreading the work involved? Well, stress no longer, because the Rink Guys are here to make it happen. The Rink Guys are Winnipeg's first outdoor skating rink installation and rink maintenance service. The Rink Guys offer free site evaluations and different rink construction options. Plus, they use a custom-sized liner to prevent any damage to your lawn. Lighting packages are also available to help illuminate your rink during those long, dark winter nights. To get your rink started today, visit therinkguys.com. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning talking about the Winnipeg Jets. Reminder, the Jets in action in Nashville tomorrow night. I believe it's a 7 o'clock puck drop, if I'm not mistaken, which means post-game will be at 9:45 back here, as we always do on our trusty YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. We're thrilled to welcome to the program from the Hohl Substack. Does a great job covering the Winnipeg Jets. Garrett Hohl joins the program this morning. Garrett, good morning. Nice to see you. How are things?
Morning. Nice to see you guys as well. Thanks for having me on.
Are you in a closet, Garrett?
I was gonna guess. Is that a pantry?
It's a closet / office. So I'm semi-retired. And I think Ezzy, I told you this already, that when I was in university, I used to work in restaurants, and so I'm helping a friend to purchase a share of a restaurant.
And so he makes you live in the pantry of the restaurant? Is that how you're helping him?
Well, I'm covering
Garrett eats the leftover food.
Yeah, I mean that's probably about 50% of what I get paid in.
Okay, well, leftovers are very important to me as well.
I know that, like, I might be wrong here. Correct me if I am wrong, but I think what you're doing is hiding from your kids, because you've got 2 young kids, right? And that's why I come here to Dave's house to do the show, because I've got a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, and unless I lock myself in my downstairs basement office, they're just gonna bang in. So I think I know what Garrett is up to. Garrett wanted to make sure that his kids weren't going to interrupt this interview.
The only difference is Ezzy's kids are like The Shining, where they'll chop through the door with an axe to get after them. I hope yours aren't like that, Garrett. Nonetheless, nice to see you this morning, and we appreciate you joining us from pantry, closet, or wherever you may be. Look, you're here to talk about.
Drew, you're in an electrical room in your basement, so it's not exactly like you're in.
He's on the Taj Mahal there.
Now.
It's true. I am also in a windowless basement, so I don't have much of a leg to stand on. Garrett, the Winnipeg Jets. After last night's game, the continued hot streak of this team is 5 wins in a row, 8-2 in their last 10. We know the numbers. We know the success that they've had. Tell our audience, from your perspective, and you certainly look at things through the analytical bent, and do a good job explaining it to the lay people in the audience. why this start for the Winnipeg Jets this year is more sustainable than the one that we saw last year, where they had a similar good start to the season.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that intro. That's very kind of you. Kinder than I think I deserve. So nice. But to kind of like go over how things are, there's kind of two different ways you can look at it. You can look from a blind perspective where the long story short is the reason why people even care about these analytics and stuff like that is just because we try to look at underlying factors that happen and that suggest whether or not a team is going to continue winning when they're winning versus whether or not they might start to drift. And there's two major things that I'd look at is one that on average, the Jets are performing well 5-on-5, regardless of which kind of metric you're looking at, whether that's goal differential or expected goals or Corsi, whatever. You can pick your poison. They all point to a similar picture that the Jets are a pretty good team. And so therefore we suggest that the team is likely to continue doing well. And that the underlying processes, they're not winning just because they're getting bounces going their way. They're winning because they're trying to do the right things and they're successfully doing the right things. So that's one way to look at it. But I kind of mentioned also in the comments because I was watching the show on YouTube, and when you guys were mentioning the 27-18 team, the 27-18 team had a hotter start. But what's funny is that analytically, they actually didn't look very good in the beginning. I wrote my one and only article that I ever did for The Athletic, basically kind of pointing out what is Corsi and what isn't Corsi, what is it good for, what is it not good for. And it's kind of funny that the best, because over the whole season, the 27-18 team was the best team analytically speaking, not just in the record. For the entire season, but they actually weren't very good for the first 15, 17 games, and then they kind of flipped the switch. And so it's kind of funny to kind of compare that because things can change, because the reason why Corsi, expected goals, and those kind of things matter is because they more align with how a team is playing in terms of their actual process. But teams aren't robots; they're not going to always stay the same. For example, with the Jets, things might even get better because, Vilardi is, or at least should be, a fairly large impact player that should improve things quite a bit.
Okay, so Garrett, that leads perfectly into my next question, because you wrote about this in the 5-hole featurette Friday. You wrote about a lot of things, so I don't know if we're going to have time to cover everything, but the Vilardi's obviously going to come back soon. It could be tomorrow versus Nashville. It could be back at home in Winnipeg against Dallas. But what I thought was really interesting that you wrote was that the top line, you write, is actually not performing as well as you would like for let's call the Jets a top 10 team. I think you would agree that's kind of where they are, or let's say a top 4, top 5 team in the Western Conference. They're comfortably in a playoff spot, right? 11-2-2 in their last 15. And so obviously Vilardi, as you mentioned, he's going to have a big impact. But I had a 2-part question in regards to what you wrote about. So I'm assuming that you like Gabe Vilardi returning to that top line with Scheifele and Connor, or if not, you can let us know where you like Vilardi when he returns. But are Scheifele and Connor not having as much of a, I guess, rebound in terms of their defensive impact as some people think? More so, Kyle Connor. I guess, why is it that Scheifele Connor Iafallo line is not tearing it up as much as people would like at 5-on-5? Sorry, there's
a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of questions there, so I'll try to get to all of them. And I tend to talk a lot, so I'll try not to go too long.
That just means less talking for us. We're fine with that.
So yeah, I agree that the Jets are a top 10 team, but obviously the goal is to be top 1 team, right? You want to be the very best. So being second is not good enough, and even if you're the best team, you want to increase that distance. So the reason why I kind of looked at all this kind of stuff is because, Vilardi's going to return. Vilardi's a very good player. And a lot of people kind of, when I looked on Reddit and also on Twitter and such like that, a lot of people were kind of suggesting oh, the top lines perform really well. They're the hot hand. We don't want to kind of break things. And so I kind of looked into the actual numbers, and then to try to truncate everything really quickly, there's a bunch of small things, which none of them on their own is very damning. But once you combine everything, it suggests to me that, that top line isn't sacred, that we should keep everything as is. Like I would suggest that, like, the top line's not performing terrible. They're like, we've had instances where the top line has been an anchor and a drag, where they've scored lots of points, but they've given up more than they've allowed, or sorry, they've given up more than they've actually created. They are kind of okay-ish, depending on your perception of okay. So, in terms of shot differentials and Corsi expected goals, they're kind of in the 35th to 40th percentile of how top lines historically perform. But in goal differential, they've been better than that. And so some people would be like, say, well, it doesn't matter as long as they're outscoring. That's all that matters. But I think they're only like +1 as a line, which works out to about 0.31 goals per an hour of ice time. That's the average performance for any top line, because even below average teams usually still outscore on the top line. Not always, but usually. So, no matter which metric you're looking at, best case scenario, they're an average top line. Worst case scenario, they're a below average top line. So right there, that gives me enough evidence that you kind of don't want to keep it that way. And then the next kind of things that I would look at is that the Jets' second and third line, the second line being the Lowry line, despite everyone saying that it's the Nemestikov line. The Lowry line is the line that's been the second most used in ice time over the Nemestikov line for every game except for 4. And one of those 4 was when Vilardi was still healthy and playing. So since Vilardi's been injured, it's only happened 3 times. The Lowry line for a second line is somewhere, depending on which metrics you're looking at, in the top 90 percentile to 95 percentile. And the Nemestikov line is somewhere for third lines in the 85 to 95 percentile, depending on which. So, like, I'm not going to try to convince people.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Garrett?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to, so you talk about, where the first and the second and the third line are in terms of the percentiles of all the, top 2 lines, top 3 lines, throughout the league. The best teams, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Tampa Bay Lightning, when they were, an elite team, if when they were winning their Stanley Cups, where would their sort of top line, would their lines all be within that 90th percentile, or would they have a line that would be lower down in the 50th percentile or 60th percentile? In terms of when you think about the real Stanley Cup contenders, do they have 4 lines that are all in the in the top of their percentiles compared to the other teams in the league?
Yes and no. So there's more than one way to, I was about to say skin a cat. It's kind of mean. There's more than one trail up a mountain. So it's not necessarily that all competitive teams, all real true contenders have been the same. But generally speaking, the top line is the most important line. And even you don't even have to look at it as an analytical perspective. You can also look at just like, what do coaches tend to do? Well, they tend to load their talent on the top line, and they tend to give their top line the most ice time. And I mean, some of that is like part of the reason why the top line is so important is because they get the most ice time. But it's whether you look at analytics or whether you look at just like how coaches tend to play things out. Your top line is the most important line because they have a +1 goal, or sorry, a +1 goal per hour of the top line is more important and better in the long run than a +1 goal for a line that's getting 5-10% less ice time, because over the long run that works out to more goals. So generally speaking, contenders do tend to have that from top to bottom. They're all performing high end. There are some exceptions to those rules, but for the most part, it is hockey is a weird game where it's both a strong link and a weak link sport. Like you look at some sports like basketball, where it's very much a strong link, or soccer, where it's very much a weak link. Hockey kind of has both influences. And so, having that elite talent is very, very important, but also having, that depth is also very important. One of the reasons why the Jets are so much better this year than last year is because their depth is way better. So like depth matters, but one of the reasons why they're not that elite team is because they don't have the top end. Not that they don't have top end talents, but the people that are getting the most ice time aren't, performing the same as like the Eichels and the Matthews.
Garrett Hohl is our guest this Saturday morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Garrett writes about the Winnipeg Jets for the 5-Hole Substack. You can see that it's his own Substack, given the Hole and Hole in each of the two names.
Well done, Drew.
Thank you.
Garrett, got to ask you about Neal Pionk. He's a player that everybody was focused on this summer. Everybody was needing him to have a bounce back season because, of course, the right side for the Jets is a bit of a weaker link, since we're talking about linkages, but it's a bit of a weaker link than the left side. So from your perspective, what have you seen from Neal Pionk through 19 games?
Yeah, I have seen improvements, both from what I've viewed from my own eye test. Also, one of the things I do for the 5-Hole is I actually track zone entries, zone exits, denial of zone entries, puck recoveries from dump ins, and scoring chances. Just to kind of, it helps me analyze the game better, just because I'm paying attention to particular things other than just getting angry or happy when goals are scored. But also it creates extra value for the people that not everyone pays for my content. I try to make as much of it as free as possible. But to help, say thank you to those who do contribute, I want to give them some value. So, all those things say that Pionk is being a better player. He's a little bit safer, although he's still the riskiest player on the Jets blue line in the defensive zone. And if you're looking at more advanced models, whether that's, the goals above replacement, expected goals above replacement over at Evolving Wild, or if you're using the SG model over at Hockey Viz, they both project that Pionk is a better player. Where they all argue is on how much better. If you're trying to use, I'm going to try not to go too much into it, but if you're using more of the Evolving Wild model, it suggests that Pionk is pretty much as good as he was, at his best. So everything's fixed. He's rebounded, no problem. But then when you look at the SG model, it suggests that, he's better, but he's still, a weak link on the team. And so then I kind of look at, why would those models have a different opinion? How are they built and why that might be? And because no one cares about the math. Long story short is the Evolving Wild model uses essentially algebra, looking at how the team performs with that player on the ice versus off the ice, and then also looks at every other variation that's existed in the NHL and tries to, algebra it out to that one guy. But the problem with that is Pionk has basically been stapled with Dylan, and the very few moments that he hasn't been stapled with Dylan, he's been with Sandberg. And those are two defensive specialists who, analytically speaking, historically are very similar in their impact, where they're both very, very good at preventing and not very good at creating. Although, recent Dylan apparently is a two-way guy because he's scoring goals and all that. But, when you look at that math, one of the problems is that there's a chance that some of the attributes which should be going to Dylan and Sandberg have actually been taken and gone to Pionk because of the fact that their ice time is so tightly knit. There's very few moments where Pionk has been separated from those two, especially Dylan specifically. If it was both of them, it might be a little bit less of a problem. And now on the SG model side, that starts everyone off. It works similarly, but it starts everyone off based off of where they are last year. So it's like, hey, this is what we thought of them last year. That's where we're going to start. Based off of how they performed this year, we're going to move them one way or the other. So that's the kind of what's working behind those metrics. And one of the things that I noticed is most of the performance improvements with Pionk is defensively, and it's going from a very, 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 very bad, one of the worst in the NHL defensive players, to not elite, but close to elite defensively. And that makes me kind of think that, yeah, there's probably some of those false attributions in the Evolving Wild expected goal or expected war models and war models. And I think that in the long run, we'll start to, as line changes happen and such, we'll start to see that level out a little bit. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle between those two models. So that's a very long-winded way to say, Pionk is better, but he's probably still the weak link in that top 4, maybe even the top 5. And for some people, you could argue in the top 6.
Garrett, I saw something online about the defensive impact that Nate Schmidt and Dylan Samberg are having together. When you're looking at your numbers and when you're watching the game, like in the sense that both those guys, when as a unit, and they've played about 100 and just over 150 minutes together, that both those guys, when they're on the ice together, the Jets' expected goals against has been very low. That they've been very good at neutralizing the other team's offensive chances. I guess now that's courtesy I got that from Money Puck. So I guess a 2-part question. Are you sort of seeing the same thing when you're both eye testing and looking at your numbers? And if so, how surprised are you about the defensive impact from those two?
Yeah, I'm not completely surprised because one, those guys are the third pairing, and so they are going against slightly less competition and difficult minutes than the other two pairings.
So you think sometimes the fact that they're playing sheltered minutes would be a big part of that, is if I can
I don't know if I would say big. I think people kind of overvalue sheltering, but it matters.
Yeah.
Because when you're playing as many minutes as they are, you're going to still be playing against the top line sometimes.
Right.
The other coaches are going to be trying to get their line matches as well. And I had someone who works for an NHL team once say to me that sometimes when teams get too concentrating on line matching, what it ends up doing is that allows the other coach to dictate the game and dictate what's going on. So there's only so much sheltering that you can do, and it's not like these guys Schmidt and Samberg have been intensely sheltered anyways. But it's definitely a factor. But the other thing is, I personally viewed Samberg as a very, very good defenseman, even in this rookie season. I know he has some gaffes that, every once in a while that has caused some people to not think as highly of him as I do. But personally and analytically speaking, he's very, very safe, but he's also he's a safe defensive defenseman in terms of being able to strip the puck, and he's strong against the wall and in front of the net, kind of like Dylan is. But I view him as being more mobile and a better puck mover than, for example, just to compare for familiarity's sakes, Dylan. Brendan Dillon, that is, because all three of the Jets' defensive defensemen are Dillons in some sort. Dylan DeMello, Dylan Samberg, and Brendan Dillon. I sometimes call them the three Dillons. But yeah, they are quite good. And one of the things is that Schmidt's overall defensive play has slightly improved, or another way you can argue it has slightly become less bad as he's kind of started to lose his fastball. So, that's something that we sometimes see before. I'm going to get myself in some hot water because some people don't agree with me, but the Jets' best defenseman was Toby Enstrom. And people are like, oh, he's so small and he always gets out muscled or whatever. But impact wise, he was one of the best defensive guys in terms of reducing chances against. And that's because, as he got older, he wasn't able to do the offense stuff that he was doing in his early years. And so he kind of concentrated specifically in one role so that he could allow people like Myers and Buff try to be the wheeling and dealing type guys. So I think Schmidt's kind of evolving his game a little bit in that means. I don't think Schmidt's a plus defensive defender, but he's less of a risk in it than he used to be.
Garrett, thanks, by the way, for a flashback to like 2014, 2015, because I remember back in the TSN 1290 days, I made the bold proclamation that I think Ben Sherratt is better than Toby Enstrom at that point in their careers, and I got absolutely lit up by Jets Nation. I was not a popular guy for saying that. So I think a lot of Toby Enstrom fans, I love Toby Enstrom, but I think a lot of Toby Enstrom fans are happy that you brought him up, because he was a popular defenseman back when he was a Jet, obviously, from, what was that, 2011 to 2015. But I wanted to ask you about specifically the Nemesnikov, Perfetti, Ehlers line, because you mentioned it earlier that line is, in terms of ice time, is actually the Jets' third line. But you mentioned in your recent post for the 5-hole that Nemesnikov line is a top 10 percentile, 56% Corsi, 51% expected goal share, reading here, while outscoring opponents by 2.1 goals per hour. So I guess the question I wanted to ask you specifically was about Ehlers, because Ehlers scored that beautiful goal yesterday, obviously against Florida. So obviously, Ehlers and Perfetti and Nemesnikov are clicking. Does that make the kind of Vilardi conundrum, as I was calling it, does that make it more difficult for you, or do you have no problem bumping Nemesnikov down to the fourth line? Because I know a lot of people want to see Perfetti maybe go back up the middle, or maybe see Vilardi up the middle. But it seems like, isn't that a line that's playing so well that it's got to be hard for Bowness and Arniel to make that call? Because it just seems like the numbers, back it up that line is playing really well lately.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I'm also wrestling with, because I'm not quite certain. I'm sorry to not give you a straight answer. I'm not really certain myself.
No fence sitting here. We want a solid answer.
Yeah. Okay, done. So to start off, just to let you know, those percentiles that both I was speaking about, and you kind of earlier when I was talking about the top line, and also you kind of mentioned here, those percentiles are specifically relative to being a top line. So like the 35th to 45th percentile of the top line, Jets top line, is compared to historic top lines. The performance of the Lowry line, I was comparing to historically second lines, and same with the Nemesnikov line. So I was comparing them to other third lines, historically speaking. So yeah, I mean, regardless of whether you're looking specifically versus other third lines or just in general, the Jets third line with Nemesnikov has been very good, and which kind of makes you think about whether or not you want to break that up, because there's a chance that someone else or some other variation might be worse. Yeah, there's definitely that kind of risk. At the start of the season, personally, I would say I would have put Nemesnikov outside of the Jets' top 9, just not because I think that he's not a top 9 forward, but just because I thought the other 9 were slightly better. But now I'm not so sure. And then on top of it, no, it's a difficult question to answer, because no matter what, if you're looking at analytics, you're saying that the Jets basically have to take a second line quality forward and put them on the fourth line. That's a hard thing to do, no matter what. No matter whether you choose it's Iafallo or whether it's Nemesnikov. That's which second line forward do you put on your fourth line is a tough question to answer. But I will point out, for the people that do like Perfetti at center, I will also point out that when Niederreiter was on the line and they had Perfetti as center, in all the metrics except for goal differential, the line was performing at the same level. So it's not like they got a boost when Nemesnikov was swapped for Niederreiter and Perfetti was moved out of center. It was more that they were they stayed the same.
Garrett Hohl, our guest Saturday morning, entering hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, talking about the Jets. Garrett, of course, authors the 5-hole Substack. Unmute yourself, Dave.
I know, I just did. Garrett, don't disappoint the crowd. I know in your Monday review, you said, will Kyle Connor, or how many goals will Kyle Connor score? So the question is, how many goals will Kyle Connor score? I mean, a lot of the articles were saying, can Kyle Connor get to 50? He was on pace for almost 70. So where do you see this playing out with a guy who's obviously shooting a little bit higher than his standard shooting percentage?
Yeah. I mean, 76, baby. No. Sorry. I would suggest the most as long as he's healthy, the most likely answer is he will probably be in the 50s. That's just regardless of whether you look at, just how does Kyle Connors tend to score goals per game historically and just try to average that out for the rest of the season. Or if you look at, I suggest that actually probably undervalues what he might be doing if he stays healthy, because one of the things that Kyle Connors is doing is he's shooting more relative to his ice time. And another big factor is that he's getting more ice time per game that he historically gets. And so both of those things, even if he performs like average, suggests that he should, and his shooting percentage dips a bit, he should still be scoring, a lot of goals. So I think 50 is completely within the realm of possibilities. I said that even high 50s is even possible. Whether it's most probable is another answer. But yeah, it's definitely realistic that we have a 50 goal scorer going on, just because he's already had his good luck. Who knows? Maybe the good luck will continue. But we don't expect bad luck to counter good luck. That's not how things work. And, even though Kyle Connor is outperforming his expected shooting percentage based off of shot quality, he is a high level finisher where we always expect him to at least somewhat finish above expectations.
Garrett, last one for you. I mean, every team that is a bona fide playoff contender is always looking to add pieces. We know that the trade deadline is many months away. So I'm not going to ask you to name a specific piece, but let's assume that the Jets team come trade deadline-esque time is playing at a similar fashion. And let's assume for conversation's sake that they're also relatively healthy, where, the big guns are still around and everything else. What is priority one from the upgrade perspective? Is it on the back end? Is it a stud defenseman? Way easier said than done in terms of acquiring one of those. From your perspective, what is the piece that the Winnipeg Jets need that even boosts them higher in the tiers, let's say?
Garrett, who is this year's teams? David Savard?
Oh goodness. Yeah, that's one's a tough one, because I basically see two possible options. So like looking at analytical models, the Jets forward group is basically, they all suggest that the Jets have 10 top 6 caliber forwards, which is kind of ridiculous. It's embarrassment of riches, but they also suggest that, even the Jets most elite players, because all the Jets all the Jets top players have some warts. They don't have like some guy that can do it all. They're kind of missing that elite piece on the top end. And that's really tough to get through the trade market. You're not really getting that. And sometimes if you are getting that, you're removing a lot of the depth that is kind of what's made the Jets as successful as they have been. So, I mean, that is probably the biggest missing piece, but is that a realistic missing piece? I think realistically, in terms of like actual costs and benefits being compared to each other, I mean, a lot of it does depend on whether or not Pionk is and how much he is better than the previous season. I lean the fact that he's still a weak link and the easiest thing to improve upon. And a lot of, like, I often see people say, like, the Jets need a real mean defensive defenseman on the top pair. And I personally think that what they actually need is an offense guy on the second pair and to upgrade Pionk. And the reason for that is because, analytically speaking, and my personal observations, is that the Jets' three Dylans, the three defensive specialists on the team, are very, very good and very underrated. All three of them. They're not, offense guys, but they're all really good at doing what they do. And I think DeMello is like severely underrated. Like, I've been tracking zone entry denials in terms of like stopping people from taking possession of the puck and bringing it into the Jets defensive zone. He is better than I even expected before tracking any of this. So if you're trying to get a defensive defenseman, it's going to cost you a lot to be better than DeMello, and you're not actually going to get that much better than DeMello. But in terms of upgrading Pionk and how much it's going to cost, it's probably going to cost much less and probably be a bigger improvement. And then all of a sudden you have you have Pionk on the third pairing, where he's being a little bit sheltered and hopefully making not just having less minutes, but also probably having better impact relative to ice time. But of course, then that also puts Heinola in the press box, which is, some people might say that maybe he's the solution.
You know what? It's these are good problems to have by and large if you're a fan of the Winnipeg Jets. Garrett Hohl, author of the 5-Hole Substack, thanks so much for joining us this morning and really explaining to our audience and breaking it down for our audience in an easy to understand and digestible manner. We'll keep reading the great work you're doing and keep following you as you cover the Jets games as well on X throughout the course of the season. Garrett, thanks very much. We'll let you out of the pantry there. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Get back to daddying, Garrett.
Yeah,
thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks, Garrett.
Bye.
Cheers.
There he goes. That was great insight from Garrett Hohl there this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We go to break. We'll come back talking about that. We'll get you set for tomorrow night's game between the Jets and the Predators. Much more to come. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. We're live on this Saturday morning.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Whoa, Ezzy, everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Lingan Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Lingan Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to test if the game is better at home or at Boston Pizza. The results are irrefutable. Catch the game at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Are you dreaming of your very own backyard rink this winter, but dreading the work involved? Well, stress no longer, because the Rink Guys are here to make it happen. The Rink Guys are Winnipeg's first outdoor skating rink installation and rink maintenance service. The Rink Guys offer free site evaluations and different rink construction options. Plus, they use a custom-sized liner to prevent any damage to your lawn. Lighting packages are also available to help illuminate your rink during those long, dark winter nights. To get your rink started today, visit therinkguys.com. Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Reminder, the Jets are next in action tomorrow night, which means tomorrow night there will be an Illegal Curve post-game show. Jets at Predators, 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Post-game show, 9:45 p.m., give or take a couple of minutes. We'll talk more about the Predators coming up at the bottom of the hour. Emma Lingan, the Predators beat writer, is going to be joining us to talk about the Preds, who are off to a I wouldn't say that they're off to a disappointing start. That wouldn't be fair. They're off to a pretty sort of average start is where I think most people would say, probably right where they're expected. They're 9-10. They've won 4 in a row, so they're playing better hockey. They were, not that long ago, they were 5-10 until they've gone on this recent hot streak. They're scoring a lot of goals. They're scoring more goals than I think people would expect that team to score. No, that's certainly juiced by last night's 8-goal out.
Philip Forsberg has 24 points. He's top 10 in the league in scoring. So it's like what he was doing 2 years ago. What did he have, like 80 points last year, something like that? That was his career year. So, I mean, Forsberg has found the fountain of youth.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Philip Forsberg. Yeah, it was 21-22. He had 84 points. So that was his best career. That was his best
Drew,
season.
only off by 4 there.
Not
I mean,
bad.
he had a monster season that year, and so did Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene also had good years that last year, and 2 years ago. And I mean, the biggest difference between this year and last year is obviously just they don't have the high end talent that they once did, right? And Ryan O'Reilly's been good, don't get me wrong, but I mean, this is a team that depends on guys like Luke Evangelista, who's a rookie, and he's I believe second or third in rookie scoring, but like they're expecting offense from guys like Gustav Nyquist, right? Yeah. And Tommy Novak. So I mean, the Predators forward depth just can't match up against the Jets or the Stars or the elite teams. And I think you mentioned it, Drew, the biggest difference between that we didn't expect with the Predators is they haven't been as good defensively as you would expect, right? Like UC Saros, I think we'd all agree, he got robbed last year, as far as I'm concerned. I thought UC Saros should have won the Vezina, and I think he was 4th. I don't even think he was a finalist. I'd have to go back and check that. But I thought UC Saros was phenomenal last year, and he's been good, but he just hasn't been, at that .935 save percentage level.
Yeah, you look at the team, though. You look at the Predators, and this is not a, besides Philip Forsberg. So Philip Forsberg's been terrific this year. No question about that. He's off to an absolutely scorching start to the season.
Sorry, Drew. Saros' save percentage right now is .894. Those are just un-Saros-like numbers.
You're right. But I mean, I think a lot of that probably has to do with the team that's in front of him. Because after Forsberg, who's been terrific, and Ryan O'Reilly, we know is the grizzled veteran who's, very good with intangibles and very good with all the small details, but he's not a driver anymore at this point of his career. And Gustav Nyquist is a guy who bounces around from 1-year contract to 1-year contract, and who will likely get traded at the trade deadline. That seems to be his recent career path. You look after that, and it is not a who's who of players, especially up front and even on the back end. I mean, besides Roman Josi, you got Ryan McDonough, who, again, another grizzled veteran, the guy who the Lightning basically said you have to accept this trade to the Predators, or we're putting you on waivers and you will not get to pick your next destination because they had their salary cap issues. That's how he ended up there. And then after Josi and McDonough, again, it's not necessarily a well-established or well-regarded back end, just like the forward depth is not well-established or that well-regarded. So the Jets should have an advantage on multiple levels against the Predators, but the Preds have won 4 in a row, so you also at the same time can't take that away from them, and that should also keep the Jets sharp, because that you're playing against an opponent that is feeling good about themselves, that is not that is proving to have some mettle and some fight. Not metal, METAL, but metal, METTLE.
Whoa.
There you go. If you want a spelling lesson today on the show, Dave.
We had a math lesson, and now we have an English lesson. Way to go.
What can I say? We're educating the people here on this Saturday morning. But so that's again where the Jets are facing tomorrow night, a Predators team playing well, but a Predators team that the Jets really top to bottom, I would argue, are better than in almost all walks of all facets of the game, at least in the off ice perspective, Dave.
Yeah, no, I mean, and don't undervalue the element of revenge. Barry Trott's revenge. You always got to have that in your mind. Spurned lovers, but no, seriously. I mean, this is a young-ish Nashville team. We've seen a lot of these guys on the Milwaukee Admirals, and they've graduated to the NHL. And we saw what a lot of these players did for Nashville last year when Nashville was a seller. The Jets were the beneficiary of Nashville being willing to sell, giving the Jets a Nino Niederreiter for that second-round pick. And look how good that deal has looked for Winnipeg. And as an aside, when Nino Niederreiter's agent was in Winnipeg last week or the week before, whatever it was, and I said, after last night's game, I said, I think it's time to get that extension done sooner rather than later because it's becoming more and more costly as this guy continues to play. But look, Nashville is a team that's embraced somewhat of a youth movement. Obviously, still have Saros and net, but they do. They have Milwaukee was a very good team last year, and the Admirals have graduated a number of those guys that you mentioned, Drew. And a lot of those guys, they were allowed to marinate. They were allowed to, Yakov Trenin's another guy who I think of who spent a lot of time with the Milwaukee Admirals before making the jump up to the Nashville Predators. So, that's kind of the benefit of their system is that they did have that ability to kind of refresh things. And again, sometimes when you're told you're not supposed to win, teams kind of do it despite that fact. Oh, you're not supposed to be very good. Okay, well, we're still going to go out there and try and win. And these guys have a lot of pride and they have a lot of youthful exuberance. So I think, it may catch up with them, especially with the numbers that Saros is putting forth this year. But overall, you've got a lot of guys who have, earned their time into the NHL through years of hard work in the AHL. So it's a good model we see here in Winnipeg that's worked, and it's one that's worked in Nashville as well.
Well, yeah, and the reality is, Dave, the Predators are right behind the Jets when it comes to goals for a game, right? It's a very small drop off between the Jets and the Predators. I think the Jets are 6th or 7th in the NHL. The Jets are 7th, and the Predators are 10th.
6th and 9th, but that's
there you go.
Enough.
Yeah, 6th and 9th, right? I didn't refresh my browser there, but I mean, to Dave's point, I mean, look, Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson, I mean, the Predators didn't replace those guys necessarily, apples for apples. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly comes in as a centerman, but he's a different type of player. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that, the high-end offensive upside of Matt Duchene is not there with Ryan O'Reilly at this point in his career. O'Reilly's obviously having a good start to the season, Dave, right? He's a point per game or close to a point per game, but we talked about Tommy Novak. You got 6 goals from him. You have 6 goals from Colton Sissons. You have 5 goals from Kiefer Sherwood, 4 goals from Cole Smith, right? So the Philip Forsberg is top 10 in the NHL in scoring right now, but you're getting a lot of goals from your scoring lines, right? We just went over it. So this is a score by committee team, but I mean, they're just not as good defensively as they've been. I agree with Drew. Roman Josi, is still a top 10 defenseman, maybe top 5 defenseman in the league offensively. And Ryan McDonough is still a good defensive defenseman. I've always liked Dante Fabro, Tyson Barrie. I don't think he scored a goal yet this year, but Tyson Barrie is always a good offensive defenseman, right? So the Predators are, to me, the definition of kind of middling team, right? I agree with Drew. They're at 500 right now, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of exactly where we expected them to be. They're going to have their highs are going to be high and their lows are going to be low, right? So the Jets already beat the Predators a couple of weeks back, right, at home. So I think there's no doubt that right now where these two teams are, the Jets are a better team. They're a step above the Predators, but the Predators always play well in Nashville. And this is still two teams that don't like each other. I mean, going back to that 2018 Stanley Cup series in the second round, I don't expect this to be a 7-3 game. I think this is going to be a much tighter game than the game yesterday afternoon between the Preds and Blues.
Yeah, well, you're right. Those are two teams, the Predators and the Blues. When you don't have what I'm going to call the depth, the sort of the NHL caliber depth, you oftentimes can lose structure, and you can get into the sort of the free flowing games where it becomes a little bit of a chaotic experience on the ice. We've seen that from the Jets for so many years that their games would devolve into chaos, and chaos can be entertaining. So don't mistake chaos with boring or anything like that. But it's not how you want to play. And that's where the Jets have been so successful so far this year, is that by and large, the majority of their games have been how they want it to look. I mean, last night's was a great example. You're playing against the Florida Panthers team. And remember, when the Jets played the Panthers to start the year, that was a Florida Panthers team that was without Ekblad and Montour. Well, both those guys are back in the lineup last night. And Barkov was back in the lineup.
Sam Bennett was in that game either, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right, Ezzy. Sam Bennett, who had his face rearranged yesterday by Brendan Dillon. Again, but the Jets that's why I think last night's game, I mean, and I know you hear the cliche measuring stick or statement game, and I don't necessarily buy into that at game number 18, but it does, this is, the tape from last night's game, and you saw it in the dressing room afterwards, that this is how the Jets want to play, and this is how the Jets have played. For the most part. So it's not a one-off. It's not the exception. Last night wasn't the exception. It's becoming more and more like it's the rule. And, when Rick Bowness was addressing the media yesterday morning, I thought, he had some interesting comments saying, there's been some slippage. There has been some, sorry, you're right. I got my Sam's wrong.
I put that comment up, Drew. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you were being thrown under the bus.
That's okay. That's fine.
Well, it's like, I was like, someone obviously wasn't on the post-game show, number 19 of the season, not number 18, Drew.
Sorry. I apologize. My most sincere apologies. Every now and then I make a mistake. It happens rarely, and I know it's off-putting for everybody when it does happen.
And they're both kind of smaller forwards. And also, it was weird. Dave and I were talking about this. We watched the third period here, and Reinhart is not a guy that you expect to drop the gloves. Bennett, on the other hand, you would expect because he's a feisty player. That's why it was weird, because Reinhart's obviously known for more being an offensive guy.
I got my Sams confused. Again, my apologies. You can flog
Well, you do have
me
a son named Sam, so
as long as it wasn't Sam Mandel who was in that fight.
No. He doesn't devolve into the fisticuffs just yet. But if you want to publicly flog me, everybody, you can tar and fed me later on in the town square. Somebody's standing behind me yelling shame the entire time and ringing a bell.
Yeah. But I'll throw cabbage at you.
Thank you. You can throw cabbage at me too. That's all very much accepted. I can take.
I mean, you're going to eat it as I'm throwing it at you. Like you're just going to catch it in the air.
That's got a little too much vegetable there, Ezzy. I'm not sure that I'm gonna eat that. But I honestly don't know where I was going with this. But I was saying that that's how the Jets want to play, and so they know that if they go into Nashville tomorrow night and replicate that game, they're likely going to win the majority of the games they play this year. And that's just, I mean, there's a confidence that comes with knowing that X will lead to Y, if you want to keep up with the math equations, so far today on the show.
Well, and I think I'm going to use a word here. It's consistency. And that's what you're seeing, that consistency across the board. And the Jets are playing, and Scott Arniel has talked about it. Rick Bowness has talked about it. I mean, if you're not cheating the game, and if you're playing the game properly defensively, which this team seems to be doing more often than not, you're going to possess the puck more often than not, and it will result in good scoring chances, which you'll convert more often than not. And if you keep doing those things, you're going to win. I won't say more often than not, but you're going to win those games. And that's what Winnipeg is doing. And it's really hard to mess with what has worked so well, right? Like, it's hard for any player to justify not following the structure. How could you not? You're 11-2-2 in your last 15 games. You have 2 losses in November. I mean, this might be the best November in the history of Manitoba. There's no snow on the ground. We were like plus 10 almost for part of the month, and the Jets have 2 losses. So I suspect
the Bombers did lose in the Grey Cup, though, so that screwed it up.
That's true, but this is not illegal procedure, Ezzy. This is illegal curve hockey. So we're focused on the hockey.
Illegal something.
It's exactly. So I just think that right now, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's hard for these guys to go away from that. Hellebuyck has resolved whatever issues he had. And look, like it's interesting. I've been reading different articles, obviously, for the little site called legalcurve.com. And one of the things that you would think that Connor Hellebuyck is having to adjust to is facing less shots, right? I mean, he gets maybe 10 less shots a game. 30 was kind of like almost upper limit now. Previously, it was like 45 to 50. Right. So, in those games that he was like controlling. So again, his numbers are always going to look worse if he's not facing as much shots and he's letting those goals in. But you could see that he has worked on his game. He's got it. He felt it was good already, but now he's kind of tweaked it, and he's in the mode. He's in the mode. The team's in the mode. So to me, it's a function of like, if you there's no reason to change what you're doing. It's kind of like anything, right? If you have found a winning formula, you stick with it. You don't change it just for the sake of being able to say, well, I changed it because, it was boring. All that winning was boring. You keep doing what you were doing in order to keep winning. And so I suspect the Jets that's what you'll see, because again, all of these players, especially the guys like Scheifele and Hellebuyck, now that they have their contracts, like Ezzy and I talked about, and you, Drew, the other day with respect to Mark Scheifele, you're going to see a different sort of buy-in, a different sort of mentality, because now these guys aren't worried about trying to secure a contract. They're worried about trying to secure a Stanley Cup. And that is the focus of those guys. A lot of the guys who are signed to long-term deals. And again, like I said, I think overall, that's what the focus of this team is now pivoted to, as opposed to the individual.
Well said, Dave M. You're absolutely right. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck and his numbers, again, the goal saves above expected, which is where we're always used to seeing Connor Hellebuyck towards the top of the NHL, has not been, it was not there to start the year. But look, lo and behold, the last 4 games, where Connor, and then including last night's shutout, all of a sudden he's back to, I think he's either 10th or 11th in the NHL, and he's only going to get higher in that list, but it's also way easier for him. The games have been way easier for Connor Hellebuyck, Ezzy, and how refreshed that is going to make him, and how, and that stress, making the regular season a lot easier for him should pay dividends come playoff time.
Right. And for Kyle, Dave M. is related to the owner of Manuke Denture Clinic, but he does not own the denture clinics. For Kyle, for those who are listening on the podcast, you're right. And that's why, guys, you brought in a Laurent Brossoit to take some of that load off of Connor Hellebuyck. Yeah, you guys are right. I mean, Hellebuyck is, I would say over his last 4, 5, 6 starts has looked more like the Hellebuyck that we expected from previous years, as opposed to, he was fighting the puck a little bit earlier in the season, let's be honest. But I think Brossoit can give you more starts than David Rittich could give you, for example, last year. So, I mean, regardless if you play, Brossoit today, tomorrow against Nashville, or you play him on Tuesday versus Dallas, I think we all expect, the Jets are probably going to want Hellebuyck to go up against Jake Ottinger, unless the Stars have a back-to-back situation. Then you might see Scott Wedgwood. And that's the thing, going back to the Dallas Stars, right? Like, they beat the Jets with Scott Wedgwood in net, not Jake Ottinger in net, who's, speaking of goal save above expected, he's right up there, right? So, yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Hellebuyck, I said this on last night's postgame show, boys. If Hellebuyck is playing the way he's been playing, against Tampa Bay, against Florida, on the 5-game homestand, the Jets can beat anybody if he's playing at that elite level, right? Like, we talked about the save he made on Evan Rodriguez. He made that look easy. So there's no doubt that, everything, the Jets are just a well-balanced team right now. And, the goaltending's been excellent. They're getting production from all scoring lines. And, the defense has looked much better, even though it's the same top 6 as last year.
When we come back, we'll talk about the Nashville Predators ahead of the Jets' visit to Nashville. Emma Lingan, the Predators' senior content manager and beat reporter, is going to join us on the show coming up momentarily. It's a Saturday morning. Drew Mandel, Dave Manuke, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Stay with us. We're live on our YouTube and channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Whoa, Ezzy, everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Lingan Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Lingan Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See LinganMarketDental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Betalytics to test if the game is better at home or at Boston Pizza. The results are irrefutable. Catch the game at Boston Pizza, powered by Betalytics.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at zappiagroup.com.
Are you dreaming of your very own backyard rink this winter, but dreading the work involved? Well, stress no longer, because the Rink Guys are here to make it happen. The Rink Guys are Winnipeg's first outdoor skating rink installation and rink maintenance service. The Rink Guys offer free site evaluations and different rink construction options. Plus, they use a custom-sized liner to prevent any damage to your lawn. Lighting packages are also available to help illuminate your rink during those long, dark winter nights. To get your rink started today, visit therinkguys.com. Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. We're thrilled to welcome to the program and thank her for waiting patiently as we run through our ads. Emma Lingan joins us on the program. Emma is the Predators Senior Content Manager and Beat Reporter. Emma, welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Obviously brought you on to talk about the Jets Central Division rival. Jets and Predators do battle tomorrow night in Nashville on Broadway. Emma, the Predators playing much better hockey as of late. 4 wins in a row, including a thorough shellacking. I believe when you win by that margin, it's considered a shellacking of the St. Louis Blues last night. You know, why the success for the Predators as of late, the 4 in a row? This is a team that, not that long ago was struggling at 5-10, and they're beginning to crawl their way closer to the 500 mark as a result.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, 4 in a row, and then prior to winning 4 in a row, they had lost 4 in a row, including the loss to Winnipeg at the end of their 2-week road trip. So definitely kind of a tale of two teams almost. But I think, there are a few reasons that this team is starting to have some more success now. Number one is, keeping in mind it's a new system under a new head coach, new general manager, but especially the new head coach this season and Andrew Brunette. It's a very different offensive system that he's requiring of these guys. It's very fast, high octane. It takes some getting used to, I think. So that was a big part of it. This team just learning this new system. But then on top of that, you also have kind of an interesting mix of players throughout the lineup. You've got the Philip Forsbergs, the Roman Yossis, the Ryan O'Reillys, kind of the proven veteran players. But then you also have a really solid young core of players that came up at the end of last year in the light of, a lot of key veterans getting traded, a lot of guys getting hurt. There was, those young guys came up to sort of, as a stopgap, but ended up being really, really solid and helping this team get really very close to a playoff spot last year. So I think there's finally this kind of cohesion where these two types of players are starting to kind of understand each other and get comfortable playing with each other. And, Andrew Brunette has said it a lot that there's going to be growing pains when it comes to a new system and a new team and a new coaching staff, all that kind of stuff. But, I think you're kind of finally starting to see things clicking for them. So it's, I think the game against Winnipeg tomorrow will be a really good test for this team to see if they really have, improved overall as much as it appears that they have since the last time they played this team.
And Amber, you mentioned, some of those young players, and I follow you on Twitter, and you tweeted this out yesterday. Luke Evangelista had 3 points versus the St. Louis Blues, and he's now He's second, I believe. No, check the tweet here. Yeah, see, he's second among NHL rookies behind the Coyotes, Logan Cooley. And you mentioned, I actually had to do a double take because I forgot that he was still a rookie. He played 24 games last year, so if he would have played the one more game, he wouldn't have been a rookie anymore, right? So good on Luke Evangelista for still being a rookie this year. But second round pick from 2020. He's playing on that second line, I believe, still with Kiefer Sherwood. And is it Juuso Parssinen? I had to do a double check there on Daily Faceoff. I believe that's his line, right?
Kiefer Sherwood, yes. Juuso Parssinen as of 2 games ago, yes.
Okay, so it might be a little bit outdated, but the point is he's playing in the top 6, and he's having a good start to the season. We mentioned second among rookies, 3 goals, 12 points in 18 games, and I guess you watch the Predators on a daily basis, of course. And is that not surprising to the Preds coaching staff and most Preds fans, just considering how good Evangelista was last year in 24 games of action?
Well, I think, I would say it's not necessarily surprising. As you mentioned, he was highly successful last year, but I think maybe the biggest concern, or not even concern, really more question about Evangelista after last year was, yes, obviously through 24 games, fantastic. But that was his first taste of the NHL. Can he maintain that level of productivity for a full 82 game season? I think that was the biggest question. And even coming into training camp this year, he was definitely viewed, I would say, internally as well as externally, as a bubble guy who may or may not even make the team out of camp. And I think he had a really solid camp. Didn't have his best showing, I think, at the rookie showcase this summer, but then came in and, had a really, really solid training camp, earned his spot on the team. He was playing really well in the first part of the season. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 games ago, Andrew Brunette decided to healthy scratch him, which, of course, everyone on Preds Twitter had a very healthy and normal reaction to. But I think the strategy there, and you've seen it, he's done it already this year. He did it with Juuso Parssinen. He did it with Yakov Trenin. He did it with Philip Tomasino, guys who he deemed were not playing up to the standard that he had set for them. He would healthy scratch them for a game. And in every single case, maybe Parse didn't have his best game yesterday, but that aside, I think in all of those cases, those guys have come back from that scratch and played so much better and played up to that standard. And now you're seeing that with Evangelista. And what Bruno said, with regards to Evangelista specifically, being a younger guy, he started to see he was maybe kind of starting to slide a little bit. He was getting overpowered a lot. He's, playing on the top 6. You're playing against other teams' top 6 talent as a rookie, and that can be a lot sometimes. And it just seemed like he was not skating to his best ability. He was getting overpowered a little bit. I think, the thought was, especially for a young guy, is let's nip this in the bud now and not let him continue to slide for 10, 15 more games, because at that point it might be too late. And it can really mess with a young guy's confidence. So scratch him for 1 game now, bring him back. And we've been seeing the results of that. Like you said, 3 points yesterday, 2 goals and an assist. I talked to him after the game. I said, are you aware that the last time the Preds scored 7 or more goals, you also scored twice in that game? It was in Buffalo last year. And he said, I didn't know that. I should probably do that more often. So he's getting some more confidence, and it's really good to see.
Emma, we don't just cover the Jets here. We also cover the AHL club, the Moose. And if there's one team that we're very familiar here with, is the Milwaukee Admirals, having seen them 12 times in the regular season last year, 5 times in the playoffs. So we can attest to the fact that this Nashville Predators lineup is riddled with guys who played on that Milwaukee Admirals team last season. And to me, and the question I have for you is, are you seeing the benefit from a Nashville perspective of all of those guys having an opportunity to grow together in the AHL and then not get called up piecemeal, but almost en masse, and get a chance to really make an impact and make it a little bit easier for them to do so because there's less pressure, because there's there's a lot of them and they're all familiar with each other?
Yeah, I'd say that's certainly part of it. I think I won't go so far as to say that was the plan to call them all up en masse because it certainly wasn't. Like I said, it was the result of injuries and trades, and pretty much anything that could have happened to the Preds last year did happen. So it was kind of the result of a lot of that. But I think it is. They've all, like you said, developed together. They've played together under Carl Taylor and his staff in Milwaukee. They've, which has been immensely helpful to them. But I think the other thing that has been helpful is that a lot of those guys, you had Evangelista, you had Tomasino, Igor Afanasyev, all those, those young forwards who came up for a little bit last year, and then some veteran guys too. So like Sherwood, Michael McCarron, Mark Jankowski all came up and played at some point for the Preds last year, and then went back to Milwaukee to help them with their playoff run. So a lot of those guys, the younger ones, the Evangelistas and whatnot, have now had some very valuable playoff, postseason experience, albeit in the AHL. But I think that that's hugely helpful when it comes to, not as much skill development because that's already there. It's more about like learning how to win games and winning important games. And I think that that's been really helpful experience for them.
Emma Lingan is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show this Saturday morning, talking about the Nashville Predators ahead of the Jets and the Preds tomorrow evening in Music City, USA. Emma, we're used to seeing sort of the Nashville Predators as more of a tight-checking, defensive-minded team, whereas this year it's not the case. They're top 10 in the NHL, 9th overall in goals for, middle of the pack in goals against. Is that a function of both maybe Andrew Brunette, you mentioned he's playing sort of a more aggressive up-tempo style. Is that sort of him evaluating the players that he has and maybe saying, this team isn't built to be a defensive team first and foremost, so we're going to have to lean into more of the offensive side of the game? Because you look at the back end for the Predators, and I mean, we know Roman Josi is still all world, and then after that, Ryan McDonagh has a very good pedigree from his time in Tampa Bay, particularly, and every stop he's had in the NHL. But it's not necessarily a who's who of defensive responsibility on the back end, especially a guy like Tyson Barrie, who is more known for being an offensive style defenseman. So is that Andrew Brunette sort of tailoring the approach for the players that he has available to him?
I would say to a degree. I think if you watch Andrew Brunette and any of the teams that he has coached, that's the style he's going to play regardless. And I think if you don't fit the style or the system, then you're probably not going to be very successful. And so I think that he, his big thing obviously is offense. He wants to have the puck. That is his biggest thing, is puck possession and, being on top of the puck and not constantly defending, which is what you saw a lot of the Predators of last year under John Hines. Very tough, very defensive minded team. Now you're still seeing a little bit of that this year. You've got guys, the big forwards, the big kind of more bottom six guys like a Yakov Trenin, a Cole Smith, who are big, heavy hitting guys, and they, can play that defensive role very well. But then at the same time, both of those guys, you're already starting to see some more offensive production from them. More of what they're not just pigeonholed into that one role of just hitting guys and being big and being defensive forwards. So I think you're starting to see kind of the confidence of those guys who maybe had been pigeonholed in that sort of like strictly defensive offense role. And now they're starting to really kind of mesh together and really start to produce offense. And then you mentioned on the back end, funny enough, yesterday, as you mentioned, the shellacking in St. Louis, it was so the Preds scored 8 goals. They had 14 different guys on the score sheet, and Roman Josi did not have a point. And that was shocking. Like, I feel like that never happened. Yeah. That was so bizarre. And we were talking about it on the bus afterwards. I had to double check. I was like, really? But, not to say that Josi is not producing or contributing in other ways, because he certainly is. He's usually one of, if not our top, the top of the team in shots every game. He's definitely creating chances, but he, at points last year, it seemed like especially once Philip Forsberg got hurt, it was like Roman Josi is our offense, which is a little scary considering he's a defenseman. But I think now you're starting to see a little bit more of these guys starting to show off their offensive abilities that maybe they had kind of been, I don't know if it was told not to or coached not to, or, kind of been preached to that this is your role to be a big guy and just to hit people and, not create offense. And I think now under Burnett's system, we're seeing that there are guys who can do both. So to answer your original question, I don't think that it's necessarily tailoring it to the players you have available. I think it is looking at the strengths, and we're not going to take a Yakov Trenin, for example, and say, okay, you need to go score 40 goals this year, because that's not his game.
Right.
But I think it's like, okay, you can do a little bit more than just hit people though. You can create offense, and you can, he's doing things, he's killing penalties, and he's now had, I think, 3 goals in his last 4 games. And so I think you're starting to see that, Andrew Brunette is getting to know his players a little bit more and what they're capable of.
Emma, we have to ask you about David Poile's pregame ceremony on Wednesday. The Predators played the Flames, and I didn't watch the game live, but I caught highlights, and his family was there, and I saw Craig Conroy, the Flames general manager, who obviously played many years for the Flames. He presented him with a plaque, and they announced that he was going to be the first inductee. I believe it was called the Golden Hall, if I'm not mistaken, the Preds Golden Hall. And I think they also mentioned that he's going to be administering, or he's going to be the gatekeeper of the Preds Golden Hall. But obviously, none of us know David Poile personally, but everybody in hockey knows who David Poile is, right? Like the longtime general manager of the Predators. And obviously, because Barry Trotz is from Manitoba, we've followed the Predators in addition to the Jets and the Predators being in the same division. But just, how special was that to be a part of? And also wanted to ask you, how involved is David Poile with the team? Like, has he kind of stepped back and he's not really involved at all? Or is he involved, on the day-to-day? Or obviously his presence looms large in the city of Nashville with the Predators organization.
Yeah, I consider myself very, very fortunate, even though we only overlapped for, 1 season. Last season was my first with Nashville. So I was fortunate to be able to work pretty closely with David for the last year of his general manager career. But I think so there's not enough time to talk about what David has meant, not only to the NHL, but to hockey, to the city of Nashville. I mean, people never would have thought that, Nashville, Tennessee would be able to have a hockey team and, be successful there. And he's the architect of that. He's the reason that it happened. And, I think last year, it was a little bit, I would say, interesting during the second half of the year. He had announced that he was retiring. Barry was here. Barry was coming on the road with us, and Barry was very much around. And so it was almost like we had the 2 general managers at the same time, but it was really more, it was still David's team. Barry was just there to kind of shadow everything. And now, that's one thing that I have to give David a lot of credit. After 25 years in that role, he really has stepped aside and allowed it to be Barry's team. And, he is definitely still around. He's present. I see him at the office quite a bit. I think old habits die hard. So I don't know that he'd be able to completely just cold turkey retire and never come back. But I think, when it comes to the big decisions and the day-to-day stuff, I think he's involved in the sense that he likes to be kept up to date about what's going on with this team that he built, from the ground up. But I think when it comes to the actual decision making, it's very clear that this is Barry's team now. And a lot of Barry is a little, he's different than David. I think he's got some David in him. I think he's got some Lou Lamoriello in him. I think he's got kind of a nice combination of, maybe a lot of different styles of general managers that he has worked for. But you're definitely seeing, some of the things that were important to David is, taking care of your people, whether that's people who are on the ice or the behind the scenes people, like myself, for example. I think it's, Barry is very careful to, he really wants to get to know people, and he wants to, know them as people. And I think that makes the organization so great to work for. But at the same time, he expects a lot of his team. He expects a lot of his players. And I think that, you're kind of seeing, like I said, maybe a David and Lou kind of hybrid right now. But I think it's been really great for the organization as a whole.
Emma, we're a Winnipeg-based show, so we're contractually obligated to ask about Winnipeg players whenever we speak to someone who covers a team that has someone like that. So can ask about Cody Glass, of course. 14 goals last season. He's got none this year. He's only played 9 games. Obviously, he had some issues. So what can you tell us about Cody Glass this season so far for the Predators?
Well, unfortunately, for us and for Cody especially, he is now back on IR with a upper body injury. I think that, unfortunately, we're starting to see kind of shades of his early career of when he had a lot of injury issues. Granted, then it was more lower body, but now I think, Cody is such a strong-willed, he's such a positive guy, and he works harder than almost anyone I've ever met. And he, we saw that last year, that he was really kind of a breakout season for him. And he, again, it didn't start that way. He did not have the best start to his season. He was a kind of a perennial healthy scratch, actually, for the first part of the season last year. And then, came in, worked his way up the lineup, ended up, being a top 6 center, especially, by the end of last year, with him being only 23 years old. He was like one of the veterans at that point, because they had so many actual veterans who had gone down with injury or been traded. And so, you really saw him develop a lot as a player and as a person last year. You really hate to see it for him this year. It was funny when he did not end up making the 2-week trip with us that ended in Winnipeg, because that was a re-aggravation of his lower body injury that he had. And so I think, it was weird. I was actually talking to him while we were in Winnipeg. I said, this is the first time I've been at Canada Life Center and not had to interview your dad before a game. I'm like sitting around. I'm like, what do I do? Like, this is weird. It didn't feel right. So I think, obviously he's out. He's week to week now with that upper body injury. It's unfortunate. You mentioned Luke Evangelista earlier on the line with Kiefer Sherwood, and it's been kind of a rotating cast at that center spot. It was Tommy Novak. He went down. Then it was Cody Glass. He went down. And now it's, we were starting to say, like, is that a cursed position? Like, does that mean Parsonen's going to go down soon too? But, I think he is just such a hard worker, and there's, he's such a good, good guy to have around the team too. And I think that, no one is more upset than he is right now that he's not playing. But, the hope is that he'll continue to rehab and be back before the end of the season.
Emma Lingan is the Predators' senior content manager and beat reporter. The Jets and the Preds tomorrow night in Nashville. Emma will have it covered online thoroughly, as she always does. Emma, thanks so much for joining us this morning on the program. Appreciate your time and your insight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Take care, Emma. Thanks so much. There goes Emma. We got a couple minutes left on this morning's edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We remind you of a couple things.
Great interview. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, we remind you of a couple things. The post-game show is tomorrow. That's going to be at 9:45 tomorrow night after the Jets and the Predators. We also remind you, coming up in a couple weeks' time, Thursday night, December 7th, Illegal Curve live on location. We're going to be at Boston Pizza on Taylor Avenue. Come celebrate the holiday season with Illegal Curve. We're going to be there for the Jets and the Avalanche. There's going to be drink specials. There's going to be food specials. There's going to be Illegal Curve related specials. And then, of course, the live edition of the Illegal Curve post-game show after the Jets and the Colorado Avalanche.
You want to see everybody there. fair because this is the first game between the Jets and the Avalanche this year.
That's right. That's why we
so
did
it's
that
kind of
game.
crazy, but that the first game of the year is December 7th. But so it's going to be a big one. I mean, like you joked earlier, Drew, about calling the Jets Lightning a measuring stick game or calling the Jets Panthers a measuring stick game. But I mean, regardless, these are just two of the best teams in the West going at each other. So yeah, we want to see everybody who's in the chat right now, everybody who's watching live on YouTube. We expect to see each and every one of you. There's 282 people watching live right now, so I want to see all of you.
There you go. As he's demanding attendance,
even the people who live out of town.
Even though you got to fly in Thursday, December 7th.
Jordan lives in Australia. Get on a flight. You have time. You have 2 weeks to get here.
We're live at Boston Pizza on Taylor Avenue on Thursday, December 7th. The Jets playing well. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of the AHL team.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minute Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Dave M., sum up the problems for the Manitoba Moose, because it's not that they're just losing. They're getting, I'll use the word again.
Shellacked.
I was going to say, what the hell am I supposed to talk to? I did a Minute Moose Minute last night.
I know.
Let me tell you.
Is it goaltending? I mean, is it strictly goaltending? I mean,
no. I mean, it's collective team play. I mean, the goaltending hasn't been good. Colin Delia has played the last few games. Oskari Salminen is in witness to protection right now. He hasn't played in a long time. Thomas Milic is doing well, but he's in the ECHL. He played 4 games up with the Moose, 2 in relief, 2 as a starter. The defense.
Sorry, let me just interrupt you for a quick second. Did they send Milic back so that he doesn't have to be sort of in the firing line that the Moose seem to be subjecting their goalies to lately?
I mean, I don't know. I think that the plan, to be honest with you, all along was to have the 2 veteran goaltenders who I would have expected, a better result. To be honest with you,
I was going to say, Dave, Milic is 20 years old. I mean, he was playing in the WHL last year. So I think we can't forget that he's still young. He was drafted as an overager, but we can't forget that he's 20 years old. He's young. So I don't think the plan was ever, Dave, to have Milic play 30 games for the Moose or anything like that.
No, I don't think so either. And it's funny because someone, I said Thomas Milic, because he picked up his second pro shutout. He got a shutout for the Norfolk Admirals, his second one in his first game back. I think he made 28 saves. And then someone, I said, he had a good start, blah, blah, blah. He's 5-0-1 with Norfolk. And someone was like, are they already ruining another, goaltending prospect? And I'm like, well, no, guys playing the ECHL. And I looked and it was like, guys who have won the Stanley Cup, Tim Thomas, Jonathan Quick, Braden Holtby. There's
Quick's
been a number of
phenomenal this year for the Rangers as an aside.
No, I know. Well, Connecticut guy, he was happy to put on the Rangers uniform. Probably grew up, cheering for the Rangers. But the point is that there's no rush. He's played 5 or 6 games in the ECHL.
Like Dave, just quickly, Milic is not eligible for the World Juniors.
No.
Stu's asking.
No.
It's an under 20 tournament, and Milic is 20.
Yeah, no, he's not eligible. But the point is, but as you hit it on the head. I mean, the kid was in the WHL last year. He was the WHL goalie of the year. But the fact of the matter is there's a long runway. And guys, remember, it's not a bad thing. I mean, everybody wants to accelerate everybody's growth, but you've got Connor Hellebuyck signed for 7 more years. You don't need Thomas Milic advancing. Remember, he's only on an AHL deal right now with the Moose. He doesn't have an NHL contract. So the fact is you're not really needing to expedite Milic's development. So let him develop in the ECHL. And as I said, I just listed up Thomas Vokoun played, I think, 35 games in the AHL, in the ECHL, went on to play 700 games in the NHL. So the fact of the matter is, like T. Conopoli is saying, and I'll say it for the benefit of the folks listening on the podcast, you play in the ECHL for the shot volume and workload. And that's what the Jets organization wants. And ultimately, I think, especially because you got to remember, they have a young group with the Moose that I don't think they want to have a young goaltender as well. And then probably the hope was that this having more veteran guys like Colin Delia and Oskari Salminen would be a steadying force for a young I mean, they were already young last year. They're younger this year, younger forward and defensive group. And they don't have nearly as talented a defensive group. They'll get a boost when Ville Heinola is ready to resume and put him on a stint. And they obviously don't need him to clear through waivers. So he'll be fine. Obviously, they'll get something back. As Gabe Vilardi comes back, they'll get Dominic Tonnato, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby. So the fact is they'll get a boost from those guys. And again, they'll lose Declan Chisholm because his conditioning assignment ends on Sunday. He's been with the Moose for 2 weeks. So
that's something we haven't really talked about. Once Ville Heinola is healthy, what do you do with that logjam on?
Well,
on
Heinola,
defense, right? You're not necessarily going to keep both Chisholm and Stanley up with the Jets. I mean, they obviously could. But there's something to be said there with when Heinola comes back and what you do with those defensemen.
So quickly, I'll say, because I know we got to go, but just quickly, what they'll do is they'll put Heinola. My guess is, and this is my guess because it just doesn't make any sense.
Heinola will start off with the Moose for sure.
You've got to start him with it for at least three weeks to a month, maybe even of Heinola down with the Moose to really get his conditioning up and get him maximized. Maybe not a month, but a long time.
Couple of weeks.
Playing, a lot of time playing games. Because also we don't know the stretch, right? We don't know exactly when he'll be back. It could be a stretch of time when the Moose don't have a ton of games. So you got to pay attention to that thing. But the point is, and look, ultimately, you could ask, Logan Stanley to go on a conditioning assignment and play 2 weeks for the Moose. I'm not saying he has to agree, of course, but it's not unheard of. They have a guy go down and play there. It alleviates the problem. But Heinola, as soon as he comes back and he's ready to come back, he'll go to the Moose. So that'll alleviate that issue.
And Heinola is waiver exempt.
Yeah, he is. So that's not an issue. That's an unfortunate thing for him, but it's a benefit for the organization because it allows them to punt the decision down the road. And then when Heinola is ready to return, you'll see what you have to do. But yeah, I mean, for now, you got Chisholm back as of Sunday. He'll play the last game with the Moose, which means he would have played 8 games. He was ill for the game on Wednesday night, I believe. So he will have played. If he plays tomorrow, which I presume he will, he'll play 7 of the 8 games. So it's good for him. Got his conditioning up.
There you go. There's the Moose recap from Dave M. Lots to talk about, of course, and we'll do it again more tomorrow night after the Jets and the Nashville Predators with the Illegal Curve post
and the Moose
show.
And the Griffins.
And the Moose and the Griffins. So 9:45 or so tomorrow night. Be sure to be back here and join us. In the meantime, everything is available on illegalcurve.com. That's your source for all your latest Winnipeg Jets news and Manitoba Moose news and audio. Big thanks to all of our sponsors: Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Lingan Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and of course, Farmery Beer, number 2 Donald Street. Get your beer and tip a few back safely and responsibly while enjoying your weekend activities.
I have to restock, Drew. I've only got one left in my fridge. I bought a 12-pack of Farmery beer, and
get going.
It was a couple weeks back, so I got to go pick up some more. It's the weekend. Party time, Drew.
Go get going. No, don't wait on my account. Go do that right now after the show wraps up. Big thanks to everyone for joining us. Big thanks to Garrett Hohl. Big thanks to Emma Lingan for joining us in case you missed it. Instant replay available on the YouTube channel and podcast soon to come via the magical work of Mr. Manouk. Thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow night, 9:45. Until then, be safe, be responsible with whatever you do. Illegalcurve.com. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.